Hello, my name is Marissa Muscovich, and this is my presentation for the Senior Seminar, The Meaning of Life. So before I go into my presentation, I want to talk about the goals of this presentation. I'm going to learn about the metaphysical view of the nature of reality, my conception of human nature, the causes of unhappiness and dissatisfaction, and how to attain a fulfilling and happy life. So to begin, my metaphysical view of the nature of reality. I talked about Karl Marx. Karl Marx was an atheist. He presented himself as a social scientist. He wanted a purpose for his work. He mentioned that he didn't want to just interpret the world, but to change it. Now, Marx has been associated with communism and poor politics, but I believe that his ideas are actually enlightening and not at all far-fetched. Karl Marx developed this materialist conception of history. He explained that the driving force of social change as material rather than mental. So what he means by that is human history was not caused by a particular god, spirit, or faith, but rather the social and economic conditions of life. Marx claimed to have found the scientific method for studying economic history of human societies. He applied his materialist theory as an explanation of social structure, function, and change. Karl Marx views capitalism as an ideology, and he's very critical of it. He says that the legal and political systems are in the hands of capitalists. So capitalists are given all this power, and they're in control of all the economic processes of production. He explains that laborers work not for themselves, but for the capitalist whose goal is to exploit them by paying them only the minimum wage for survival. I think the United States provides a great example of this type of capitalism. I mean, even so, the US doesn't provide an actual living wage for Americans to survive on, like Marx suggested. The class disparity in the US is continuously increasing, and the fault lies at the hands of the proletariat. I think this is extremely relevant within the argument of raising the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour. I think a minimum wage should actually be increased to over $21 an hour if it kept up with the worker productivity and inflation. Basically, Marx predicted that capitalism would become increasingly unstable and that class struggle would increase, which is what I think is exactly happening in the United States right now. Now, I don't suspect that a communist revolution of sorts will happen to the United States, but I think especially with this presidential election coming up, that there's going to be a revolution in our social structure, a revolution in our economy, and our education. So obviously some critiques of this theory would be the development of labor unions, teacher unions, groups of people coming together who demanded a 40-hour work week. Employees demanded on-site safety and health regulations. These groups developed child labor laws and etc. So people did come together and they demanded control over the capitalist regime. So my concept of human nature kind of focuses on Plato's idea of soul. He says that our soul is divided into three parts, which is reason, appetite, and spirit. These are all kind of physical urges that we have, like love, ambition, and our frustrations. Humans experience these different elements all at once. We can experience feelings of lust, romantic love, and reasoned judgment. It's just part of our human nature. So we're not self-sufficient and we need others. Plato explains that we benefit from our social interactions. We benefit from other people's talents and aptitudes and their friendships. So my personal interpretation of human nature is that we have all these elements by nature that make up ourself, and we have passion and we have emotion built into our soul, and no one is the same. Different people have different interests. We all have different personalities, and it kind of leads me into my next point, the diagnosis of causes of unhappiness. I'm going to go along with Plato still, just because I like his interpretation of like the causes of unhappiness and just the way he explained it. So like I said, people are different. They have a nature that's predominant. Some people are dominated by reason, spirit, appetites, like I mentioned in the previous slide. The people who are dominated by reason, they seek philosophy and they seek knowledge, and people who are dominated by spirit seek reputation and they seek prestige. Individuals who are dominated by their appetites, they seek profit and they seek material and money. And so each person has a role to play in society. There's this balance between spirit, reason, and appetites. And so Plato explains that a well-ordered society, to have a well-ordered society, each person has to play their proper role. And then he talks about how societies are set up and how there's a sort of parallel between proper functioning individuals and proper functioning societies. So, for example, good societies produce good people who in turn produce good societies, and then likewise, bad societies produce bad individuals who in turn help produce bad societies. He talks about the societies which he thinks is best, a meritocracy, which is where the talented rule. And then he goes into detail about the 4 types of imperfect societies: the timarchy, the oligarchy, democracy, and anarchy. And then just real quick, the timarchic society, it values honor and fame, while reason is neglected. So spirit's dominating the society. With an oligarchy, money is valued, and money kind of rules politics and dominates society. His vision of democracy I don't necessarily agree with. He says the poor seize power and they're dominated by their appetites. He describes the common people as lacking in discipline and pursuing mere pleasure of the moment. And then anarchy, obviously the total lack of government. So I don't believe that within a democracy common people lack discipline. I think that we living in a democracy is what keeps us from being unhappy. But the problem with the United States, for instance, is that I don't necessarily believe that this is a democracy anymore. I think that we're living in this sort of oligarchy where Plato explains money is ruling politics. And I think this is what's causing unhappiness. A lot of Americans feel as though their voice isn't necessarily being heard, and that there's like this upset of our roles in society not being performed the way that we expect them to be. So, on how to attain a fulfilling and happy life. Continuing with Plato, he describes happiness as the harmony of personalities in society. There's that balance of appetite, spirit, and reason, like I discussed earlier. He says that harmony and justice play a role. In my idea of happiness, there's this lack of justice that creates an upset, and I think that especially like systemic racial injustice, the inequality of women is what's damaging to our society. There needs to be this institutional reform and a social change to restore harmony in our society. In order to do this, I think that we need an education. I think education is the prescription for a happy life. All aspects of education, like academic, musical, physical, just education in general, takes place in the context of this social and political system. Knowledge is embedded in everything that we do and how we communicate in society. I think as a society, we need to place an importance on education instead of denying knowledge to those who can't afford it. Children, for example, kids grow up in these poor neighborhoods and they're not getting the same quality public education as others who grow up in more affluent neighborhoods. And the thing is, children can't choose where they grow up. So they can't choose the type of education that they receive. And there's this imbalance of structure in society and how we view knowledge. I think that just as a society, we would be happier if we were given equal opportunities to learn. Knowledge and the benefits of an education are what I believe makes society happy. And I know that I'm applying my thought to our political system in the United States a lot, but I think it's important to address these issues. And I think that once we learn and understand, we can initiate change and we will all become a happier society. So thank you very much for listening to my presentation, and have a good summer.